Representative Todd Achilles, how are you, sir?
What's going on, Matt?
Hey, do I have to call you representative now that we're out of session?
No, you can just
God,
call
like,
me.
just Todd. Just Todd.
Hey, you.
Hey, man. Hey, guy. Always, whenever somebody calls you guy, number one way to know they don't remember your name.
No idea.
Listen, I asked you in here because obviously I cover a lot of things in medical. There is a problem that there are many problems with attracting more physicians to the state of Idaho. Some of them have to do with public education because, surprise, if you're like a 35-year-old doctor, you want to raise a family in Idaho, you want a good education system. Some of them have to do with Medicare reimbursement rates because, surprise, Idaho has a lot of retirement or aging population communities, and that reimbursement rate is a lot lower for doctors compared to somebody who's like 30 years old. So we have a lot of different things. One of the things that I've started getting educated on is our non-compete clauses. Because if say you're like St. Luke's or you're St. Al's and you're a medical system that's bringing in doctors, trying to bring in doctors, you're like, look, man, I'm going to spend like $50,000 for relocation fees. I'm going to have to get them set up with this thing and we're going to like provide them patients and stuff. This is a substantial cost to me as the system getting this person here. So if this person shows up and then a week later, they just bail after I've set them up with housing and I've introduced them to the community, and they bail and they go work for somebody else, I'm out all that money. Yeah. This is not a surprise thing for a lot of people. Therefore, there's a non-compete clause which says, hey, look, man, you just got to work with me for like the first 3 years and then you can go do your own thing. And like, then I get made whole, you get made whole, we're both protected, we move on from there. Yeah. That, in theory, is totally fine. But what happens a lot of times in practice is there are a lot of asterisks and like, small bullet point text that at the bottom where it's like, and this, and this, and this, and then you can't get out of it. And if you're in a bad working situation, you got to stomach it. And then it's like, hey, you can work. Okay, you can break this, but you have to go 100 miles outside of the Treasure Valley. And it's like, okay, where am I going 100 miles outside the Treasure Valley to work in a large medical system? So again, this is something that you've been focusing on. Talk to me about this.
Yeah, no, I introduced a bill in the last session to ban non-compete agreements. And I think going back to your example, so if you recruit somebody and you move them out to Boise to work in a hospital, and again, say it costs $50K, if they split early, fine, they can pay that back, right? But what's happening is people are using non-compete agreements to basically tie the workers' hands. And this applies to, a surgeon running a trauma center to somebody like flipping burgers. I mean, non-compete agreements probably reach somewhere around 70% of Idaho workers.
Oh, I had no idea.
And it comes way down it comes way down into a bunch of different areas. And honestly, I mean, the article about the dock at St. Al's is really interesting because that non-compete agreement had a 90-mile radius and 18 months he had to sit out of the market if he left St. Al's.
Could you give a little background on this?
Sure. So the doc's name is Parker Fillmore, and he was recruited here to run the trauma center at St. Al's. By the way, he had double duty being a doc in the Idaho Air National Guard, so he sort of did that on his weekends. And what happened is, I mean, I think he deployed, came back. St. Al's Trauma Center lost its certification, and then something happened between him and St. Al's, and he decided to go work at another hospital. Correct?
No, to be clear, he was working at the trauma center, and then the trauma center lost its certification. So what he was employed and recruited to work in no longer existed in St. Al's.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. But there's need for trauma surgeons at the smaller hospitals around the Treasure Valley. And basically he got a job working at one of the other ones, and St. Al's came back and said, no, we've got a non-compete agreement with you. You're not allowed to go work in the hospital. So he no longer has a job at St. Al's, and he's not allowed to work as a qualified trauma surgeon at other hospitals. So there's so many things that are wrong with this. One, if you ask somebody to go, you can't also prohibit them from finding another job. Number two, we're 50th on a per capita basis for docs. The last thing we should be doing, to your point, is restricting the movement of docs. And number three, and this is my bigger beef with non-competes, is it fundamentally limits, the economic liberty of individuals, right? We should, in this country, have every right to move up the ladder, find a new job, and go forward. Now, that doesn't mean you can take a customer list with you from your old employer. That doesn't mean you can take intellectual property and patents and stuff like that. But dude, you've got if you don't have a right to move and find a better job, then what the hell are we doing here? And this is the fundamental problem with non-competes. I've been in the tech industry. When I first entered the tech industry, it was only for like very senior people, and it was mostly around intellectual property and understanding what's going on with the business and roadmaps and stuff like that. But now it's just exploded, and all it does is just lock people into crappy jobs that they can't leave, and it completely eviscerates any competition in the labor market. So this is like the most unfree market thing you can do.
Okay, let's back up here. So understood 100%. We have the problem though that let's take the recruiting from out of state, right? And the investing in the employee, right? The flipping the burgers thing seems insane to me. And if that's a thing where it's like you get a job at In-N-Out and then you can't flip a burger somewhere else, let's not even address that because that seems so ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
But this one, because you do have the potential for one of the two parties to get the short end of the stick here, right? So if we're talking from a system standpoint, you're saying, hey, if I, the St. Al's medical system, invest, say, $50,000, I do have the capacity, totally fine within a contract to say, hey, if you leave in the first 18 months, then by the way, you have to pay me back this amount of money. And you could even advertise it, say, it's like, okay, 18 months, blah, blah. So let's say $3,000 per month. It's like, hey, if you stayed a month 12, then you only owe me $18,000.
Exactly.
Like whatever. So you could amortize it out until the point where you're like, hey, look, I've been made whole. I hope you voluntarily stay in our employment and engage with our system, but you are essentially free to go, right? So there is precedence for, hey, we understand there's a problem for you, the system, and you can protect yourself in this way. Like, why don't people do that?
Well, so that's the difference between like a recruiting bonus and a non-compete. So you're using a non-compete to cover a recruiting bonus when you could, a more appropriate way to do this is rather than limit somebody's ability to move and go somewhere else and bring competition in the labor market. When you're really concerned about, hey, I spent $50K to move you and your family out here. If you split in 3 years, I want the balance back.
Yeah, sure.
That's fine, right? I mean, that's out in the open. That's part of it. But what's not okay is to limit somebody's ability to just move up and move in a different role. Like, what if you get recruited out here by whatever company X, and you're a year into it, and you're like, this is not the place I want to be. They're a mess. They're doing unethical things. And now you're stuck, right? They may be doing stuff that is illegal. And if you try and leave, they're going to sue you. So all the onus then and the cost is on the employee, not on the employer. And again, I mean, what you see in this, and the FTC has done some really good work on, and unfortunately, it's kind of tied up in the courts. But they have a summary of all the comments that were submitted when the FTC was doing this rulemaking back in 2024 from Idaho, and you see again, and it's not, it's a lot of vets, it's a lot of nurses, it's a lot of docs, it's chiropractors that, This big corporation came in, they bought my practice, and then, I had to sign a non-compete, and then, they're just a disaster, and I can't take care of my patients, and it's unethical, and I want to leave, but I can't. Come on. That should not be, we shouldn't have statutes supporting that kind of restrictive work environment.
Are there no caveats in the non-competes that if good faith efforts, or like if there's like a substandard work environment or something that essentially articulates, hey, if you're being taken advantage of, you don't have an obligation to stay?
So this is where there's a difference between case law in Idaho and statute in Idaho. So statute's pretty clear in terms of not allowing it, but case law, the judges have said there's more exception. They're more willing to look at some non-compete agreements that maybe are just over the top, right? Maybe doesn't violate the law, but in practice, a judge will say, that's ridiculous. Employer, you can't do that. But
like the individual, the employer is not, and the employee is not a slave to the employer, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't get to do whatever you want with me and make me stay. Like you have to treat me fairly. You have to whatever. Sure.
And this is part of why I wanted to bring this legislation is because to be able to sort of manage that separation between what the statute says and what case law is like in the state, you've got to have the resources to lawyer up. So if the law is unclear or on sort of plain reading of the law says I'm stuck, but a judge is going to say, yeah, no, you're good. That non-compete was over the top. If you don't have the resources to lawyer up,
to get
you
in front of the
never get
judge.
that advantage. You never get that advantage.
Was your legislation going to bring essentially funding, or make it like if the judge sides with the employee, then the employer has to pay, like attorney fees or something?
It actually was just much simpler than that. So it non-competes, you ban them from Idaho. By the way, there are 4 states that have bans on non-competes. California.
Oh, don't say that name.
Hold that thought. Minnesota, North Dakota, and Oklahoma. So kind of an interesting mix of, 2 blue, 2 red states. Yeah. But looking at it from the same sort of economic justice, economic liberty standpoint. But my legislation was.
Can you say that word, justice? I don't think you get to. I don't think. No, I don't think like economic freedom. I think you have to sub in freedom. You can't say justice.
Okay,
you're in the wrong state of justice.
So it all leaves it.
Economic propriety. I was going to say fairness. You can't say fairness. No,
economic
it's justice.
Economic liberty.
Economic liberty and freedom.
Yes.
There it is. We nailed it.
Economic liberty.
Come on now.
So my legislation was you basically ban non-competes, and then the only exceptions on that ban were if you're selling a business, then it's appropriate for the buyer of the business to say, hey, you need to stay out of this sector.
Sure, of course.
And then somebody making over $250,000 a year. So the logic there was that if somebody's coming in at a senior level, if it's more of a symmetric negotiation coming into a role. And so, the employee has got, I think, a level negotiating playing field that a lot of other, particularly a junior employee who's just starting out doesn't have. So, all right.
They're more capable of negotiating in their favor.
Yeah, you can push back and you could do that. One of the big tech companies in town wanted to make sure that if somebody leaves and they want them to stay out of that sector of the economy, that they could pay that employee for a year to just stay out. I'm like, cool, absolutely. Like, that's fine. No problem there.
So, but then wouldn't that employer be getting doubly screwed? Like, say they relocated them and then the person left and then they had to like pay them to stay out.
Sorry, say that again?
So the employer brings in the Sasquatch. The Sasquatch comes in and the employer has to entice the Sasquatch with a lot of money to get him here, like a bonus or whatever, right? Pays a bunch of money. And then the Sasquatch is like, I'm out, bro. I'm going back to the mountains. And there's like, by the way, I might work next door. And they're like, no. Here's more money to go back to. Like, so I had to bring you out of the mountains. It cost me money. And now you're going to I gotta pay you to go away. So they get like doubly hammered.
This would not be in the scenario of recruiting somebody in, paying that
Sasquatch, not somebody.
The Sasquatch bonus. This is more of, somebody's been there for 5 or 6 years. They know the product roadmap for the next 18 months. And, they decide, hey, I got to move on, whatever. My family wants to move or
sure.
da-da-da-da-da,
and that would be outside of the non-compete anyway.
Yeah, because then, I mean, if that employer says, great, we get it, you guys need to move, take care of your parents in Pittsburgh or where the hell it is, right. Then fine. You can leave. We'll pay you not to go to anybody else in this sector of the economy, and you just stay out of it for a year because then the roadmaps are all new and you don't know what we're doing. Fine. That's fine. No problem.
Okay. But here's a problem though. Say somebody signs that agreement.
Here, Matt.
Listen to me. Say somebody signs that agreement. They're like, all right, I'm getting 150. All I got to do is sit on my butt for 150. I'm gonna move to Pittsburgh, take care of my mom. No problem. But the real problem comes in. What if they screw you on that and now they're in Pittsburgh and you like signed something in Idaho? Then you have to go through like federal court system or something. Like, this is a huge this would be a huge burden, perhaps valuable for the tech company because they're like, hey, this is worth $50 million. Like he knows $50 million.
If they renege, yeah. I mean, if they renege on the agreement, then that's a separate.
Gotcha.
That's a civil issue.
I'm just trying to figure out if it's enforceable at a federal level, or if that kind of thing would be problematic. I'm trying to protect the company that was worried about this. I'm just like filling in these holes because like somebody, if you're talking about somebody who leaves the city but stays in the state, there's an easy answer for that. If you're talking about somebody who leaves the state and goes into the tech industry in like Kentucky, I don't know if Kentucky has a tech industry, but Kentucky, they're like, hey, we're budding, Micron 2.0 in Kentucky and we're going into that there. And then it's like, oh, I got to go after the guy in Kentucky. And it's like,
yeah. I mean, it's, and where's the state where the contract is enforced and all of that. So, I mean, there's scenarios like that, but I think, again, these use of non-competes have been a substitute for non-disclosure agreements, for non-solicit agreements, and they've sort of become this catch-all. And it's bad. Again, it's not only bad for the worker because the worker can't do what they want to do, can't move up, but it's also bad for the entrepreneur. I mean, it stifles new business formation because you can't hire anybody. I mean, if you look at Silicon Valley and the history of Silicon Valley, I mean, there were a couple companies that, like Fairchild Semiconductor, that spawned Intel, that spawned a bunch of different companies across Silicon Valley because everybody, I mean, they worked there. And, I think the legend was that the CEO of Fairchild was just like the most disagreeable person in the state of California. And so everybody left.
So he brought in talent, aggregated the talent, and then pushed it.
And everybody spent a couple of years, and they're like, this guy's killing me. But I really, this whole CPU space, I think is going to be something. And the Intel guys split from Fairchild and started Intel.
And they brought us
and I mean Silicon Valley, the
Pentium,
and then they managed to miss all the big waves in tech since then. But
it's fine. Nvidia had a down moment too. Nvidia has like not been relevant for like the last 20 years, and now all of a sudden they're number one.
There's the only thing in the world. Yeah, well, Intel's trying to figure out how they fix things. But
Pentium 5.0. Yeah, I get what you're saying, which is essentially that we need to aggregate as much brain and horsepower into this state as possible.
Yeah.
And the argument has been made to me that they're like, listen, the non-competes for all the reasons you're saying. And first off, I didn't realize that they are essentially, that it was functioning as a catch-all, as you put it, which is like, if you're worried about this signing bonus thing, there's a solution for that. If you're worried about this thing over here, there's a solution for that. What you're doing is just using one mechanism to resolve all of these problems. And that mechanism, the utilization of that mechanism in this way has these tangential downsides to everyone, because then you reduce the probability. I have this attorney reached out to me. Actually, he's born and raised in Idaho, currently living in Texas. He's moving back with his wife, and they're worried. His wife is in the medical field, and they're worried about this exact issue, this like non-compete issue, because she wants to work in the medical field. It's like, could you imagine like being born and raised here? They're out of the state for a period of time for professional reasons. Yeah. They're coming back to the state, and they want to come back and engage in these industries, but they also don't want to be obliterated or put in a position where, it could limit their freedom as a family,
liberty,
economic liberty. See, now we're on the same page. Now you're talking, now you're speaking a language that I feel like people are going to understand. But so like, that makes a lot of sense, which is, look, we can protect everybody and make everybody whole, both the employer and the employee in the instance of a necessity to split, but that doesn't mean that we have to use this tool to do it.
Yeah, and if you look at the big companies here, I mean, even going back to my old employer, Hewlett Packard. I mean, that was formed by Bill and Dave, and they didn't have any non-competes back in the day. It could probably make the argument that Micron would have never existed had the founders, the brothers had non-competes. Because they came out of that memory space and that semiconductor space when they decided to found Micron. If it had been, I mean, it's probably not a stretch to say if Micron if somebody wanted to found Micron today, they probably couldn't do it because they would be too burdened by what's now the norm, which is non-competes, which is why I think it's so interesting. Oklahoma, North Dakota, Minnesota, California, right, that have put those non-compete bans in place. And, what does it do for the economy, right? The FTC's estimate was that the FTC non-compete ban is kind of stuck in the courts right now, and it's up to the administration. So the original rule to ban non-competes came in the Biden administration. It got challenged in the courts or stopped nationally. The FTC took it up to the circuit court, and it's kind of held in the circuit court because that's when the administration's flipped. And now the Trump FTC has got basically another month and a half to decide what to do with this. Do they want to push it forward, or are they just going to let it drop? And this original rule to ban non-competes goes away. I would love to see the Trump administration put this thing forward. I think it's consistent with, the platforms of what they ran on, and again, economic opportunity for people. And I hope they push forward on this thing. But if not, you do this thing at the state level.
Gotcha. And again, that's a big piece of what people are emphasizing anyway, which is like, let the states decide what the states want. Yeah. And let me ask you something. Where is the place where we, in an appropriate manner, lean more on the federal government for direction on things? Because I was having a conversation with some people about federalism in general recently, and it really got me thinking about, like, okay, how have we got to this point? Why do we have things so centralized at the federal government when we're all living independent lives within our state, and the states are, engaging in independent activities and have different emphases and philosophies with governance? Like, why have we put so much weight on the federal government? Like, is there an argument for it, or is it just kind of, hey, we have this hammer, let's start hitting as many nails as possible?
I don't know, because I think I might challenge that basic argument that we lean on the federal government. I mean, of all, like, the 10 largest global economies, we are the most federal. We push the most authority down to the local level. Like in Europe, there's no such thing as basically local police, right? That's managed locally. All of this is done sort of at the state or federal level. So we push way more authority down, much lower in the government stack, if you will, than a lot of other economies do. And I think one of the challenges right now, why doing this stuff at the state level is so interesting, is because Congress is basically locked up.
Right.
There's nothing happening. I mean, we see what's going on with the budget bill right now. So as a result, in terms of fixing these hard problems, particularly as it relates to anti-monopoly and antitrust and things like that, there's really good stuff happening at the state level because you can't do anything at the congressional level.
Do you think that's by design? I know this is a broader topic, but a lot of people have, I've heard a lot of people say that essentially the idea that the Republican Party wanted kind of to limit the federal government or reduce it, and there was a conflict. Again, this is what people have said. There was a conflict with the Democrats, the Democratic Party, that wanted to push more federal control. That essentially what the play was is like, all right, we're never going to agree, so let's just like filibuster and gridlock. Yeah. And then like nothing will ever happen. And if people want anything to happen in their lives, they're going to have to go to their state and local governments.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's just a pendulum every generation that goes back and forth on this thing. And I think, listen, big government's not the answer. You got to look at what are the functions that can be done most efficiently at the federal level rather than the state level, and then look at those functions that work best when they're handled locally. And I think, we do a pretty good job of this stuff in Idaho. I mean, we run a lean, mean state government. We get a lot of stuff done for not a lot of money, and that's as it should be. Other states don't have that kind of financial discipline. But there are things that, science and research and all of that, you don't want a bunch of states building their own NASAs. Right. These are the things that you want. You're going to get the scale efficiencies doing this at the national level. So great, do it there. Operate the INL. and I think that's where you got to figure out where the federal government does best and where the federal government just needs to let the states do their own thing, as long as they're operating within some broad guardrails, right? Because Jim Crow era wasn't great. We let the states do what they want, and huge portions of the populations were disenfranchised, and that's that goes fundamentally against everything this country stands for.
Right. So preserving rights, right? Having an established agreement on what the preservation of rights are at the federal level, important.
Yeah.
National defense, important. Education, portions of it could be argued to stem from, and for instance, free lunch programs and things like that. You don't want poverty to exist in Idaho and not exist in New Mexico or something. It's like, no. Like, we need to ensure a base level of nutrition for our children. Yeah. That's an idea. Got it. Makes sense. So that's really where it comes down to this broader kind of human rights and security thing. Because like, not everybody's going to have their own. Like, we shouldn't have to get 50 different militaries and then like send off all of those 50 different militaries in different. It's like, no. We have a military.
Yeah. By the way, they would all use different size rounds.
Oh my God. God bless it. I had a gal from the MWR, National Guard MWR, and the other day she was a hoot man. She said she can get me into one of the warthogs. I was like, I want to be in a warthog so bad.
I'm trying to get out there and hop in one of the tanks and do a little gunnery again, back in the old days.
Dude, let's do it. You gotta know a guy. I want to come with you for a tank.
All right, well,
listen, does the guy on the field have tanks?
Oh yeah, they got a bunch.
Oh, dude. We're gonna get on.
All right, we'll work on this.
Idaho
National Guard, if you're listening.
Yeah, please, God. I want to be in a tank and I want to sit in a warthog. She said she could get me in the simulator too. Like, God, there you go. It'd be so awesome.
Those are fun.
Anything we're missing on non-competes?
No, that's it. I mean, I think it's interesting talking with my colleagues. I think the initial reaction is employers have every right to do this. This is bad legislation, Todd. And the conversation to have with the folks in the House and the Senate is, as you're, just flip the tables around, look at it from a worker's perspective, and look at it from an entrepreneur's perspective, and how this you're basically stifling a free labor market. So, and I think, if you look at this thing from a free market standpoint, then the light bulb goes off and like, oh, I get it. I can solve the solicitation. I can solve the intellectual property. But Idahoans should have the right to get a new job.
Yeah. Listen, man, you make a very strong case. I need somebody from St. Al's on here. That's what we need. Or another company. And again, I'm not even saying St. Al's wouldn't be for your legislation. I don't know. I do know that they use non-competes. Obviously that's
when you look at the FTC feedback, it's mostly folks from the medical sector, from the healthcare sector. And I think, listen, I'm all in on helping hospitals and make sure we've got rural coverage and everything that we need to do in this state. Around hospitals and docs and everything else. But this is the one where, my friends in the hospital industry, I'm like, guys, you really got to drop this. You got to compete for your docs just like everybody else does.
Makes sense. Todd, thank you for coming in, sir.
Thanks, man.
You're taking off for a portion of the summer, then you're back. You obviously are you running for re-election next year maybe we talk about it next year, but
26.
For your bill, are you going to be trying to get this right out of the blocks at the beginning of the legislative session? Yeah. Okay. So then maybe we connect later in the fall, because I'd love to hear, again, I want to know what the hang up is, because it's entirely possible, if God willing, I get somebody from St. Al's on, they're like, this is not, which is like, first off, like, there's this big hole. Like, if there's a hole somewhere, maybe we modify things. It's like, there's got to be a way that everybody wins, because we do need docs. We do need to engage in the most attractive marketplace for employees possible, so that we get more people here. It'll especially when you're talking about 50 out of 50 for medical access, it's like anything we can do to get more people in here just makes sense.
And that's exactly why, I introduced this bill at the end of the session, just to have something out there against which we can have a conversation.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thanks for coming on, man. We'll do it again.
All right. Appreciate it.